My sister and I grew up in a neighborhood in the heart of a large city. Our parents were working professionals and they didn't come home till very late, so we didn't see them much. We'd all sit down and have breakfast in the morning as a family though. But apart from that, my older sister pretty much raised me. She would make me mac and cheese every evening when we came home from school. She knew that was my favorite. Like the core of many large cities, with buildings densely packed next to one another, vermin of many varieties ran rampant, and it was hard to get them under control. A number of my friends had rat infestations, and one fall evening when we came home to realize the mac and cheese packets were all torn apart, we assumed we had rats too. I was disappointed at first, but my sister consoled me. All the dry food in all of our cupboards had been ripped apart and picked through, leaving a royal mess inside the cupboards. But of course, the food inside the fridge was still good, and my sister made me some chicken. "Fred has rats right now," I told my sister, letting her know that might be what was going on. She agreed and said she'd tell our dad to call the exterminator. I went to bed before her, so she was the one who saw our parents when they got home. I helped her clean up some of the mess in the cupboards, and we sat down in front of the TV to eat our chicken. My sister muted in the middle of the show, and I looked at her wondering what was going on. She held her finger up to her mouth, and we both listened. We could hear the sound of scuttling inside the walls in the kitchen. It was almost more of an unusually heavy scrape. Not really the sound I'd expect a rat to make, but I had never seen one at that point, and I'd heard they were afraid of humans, so I wasn't really expecting to. The sound died down as my sister was doing the dishes, and I was upstairs brushing my teeth, getting ready for bed. Shortly, she joined me to tuck me in and read me a bedtime story, as she always did. In the quiet, we could hear the house settling, and then we heard a strange music coming from downstairs. It sounded like accordions and flutes and tambourines. Medieval-sounding instruments playing a medieval-sounding tune. It was jaunty, sounded like dancing music. On second thought, it kinda sounded similar to an ice cream truck melody. My sister told me to wait here, but of course I didn't listen. I followed her down the stairs and into the kitchen, where the source of the sound was. The kitchen lights were off, but the front hall light was on, so we could see into it a ways. Between the dishwasher and the cupboards, there was a strange, colorful light. The hose for the dishwasher ran through a small hole in the cupboard under the sink, and my sister opened it to take a look and screamed, jolting back and lifting her hands to her mouth. I only caught a glimpse of it in its last fleeting moments of being in the cupboard. I did see something scuttle out of view, but I couldn't make out what it was. Didn't really look like a rat, though. It was colorful. "What was that?" I asked my sister. "I don't know, it was moving too fast, but it could have been a rat," she replied. The next morning at breakfast, our father informed us that the exterminator would be coming the following morning. He said he'd call us in sick from school and we could wait together to let him in. And when another night had passed and that morning came, my father was complaining at breakfast about strange bites on his legs. He was reluctant to show me, but I pestered him until he did. They definitely weren't bug bites. They almost looked like miniature shark bites. There were pointed teeth marks in almost a perfect circle about an inch in diameter, and there was something wrong with the skin in the middle. It looked red and raised, or perhaps like the skin had been removed and then replaced. Naturally, I figured they must have been rat bites. What did I know? The thought was unpleasant and my dad didn't want to contend with it, but he did the smart thing and made a doctor's appointment. God knows rats are a bastion of disease. He had about 5 of these bites from his calves up to his hips. My sister had a couple on her thighs as well. "Did you know that if rats get hungry enough, they can eat a man alive?" I said. Everyone yelled at me and my parents went to work. The exterminators finally arrived 40 minutes after they were supposed to, in the afternoon. We showed them to the problem areas and they moved around our kitchen as though they knew it like the back of their hands. "You sure it's rats?" they asked. "Pretty sure. Why?" my sister said. "There's just no droppings," the guy said nonchalantly. We didn't really have an answer for him. They laid some enormous rat traps in the cupboard under the sink and pulled out the dishwasher to put down rat poison. "The hell is this?" the guy said, and we all came over to take a look. There was more space behind the dishwasher than I anticipated. Enough for 3 strange-looking little huts. They appeared to be made of dryer lint and twigs from the tree in the front yard. The craftsmanship was detailed, and they looked sturdy. My sister and I didn't know what to say. We just stared at the huts, same as them, creeped out. The exterminators looked at each other, probably thinking we were playing some sort of prank on them. They went into their van to draw up an invoice and brought it back to us to give to our dad. At last the man said to give them a call if the problem wasn't solved within 2 weeks. I guess they opted to just try to keep it as professional as possible. My sister reiterated to me, as the exterminators had, not to go near the rat traps. They were huge and would take off a finger or toe. Yeah, I know, I told her. And in the middle of the night, I was awoken by one going off. I couldn't even call it a snap. It was a loud bang coming from the kitchen. I went down the stairs to take a look, kind of excited to see what these rats looked like. But as I opened the cupboard under the sink, I saw a tiny old man in the trap. The metal bar of the trap was pushing down into his face, nearly cutting his head in half so that his upper jaw was awkwardly scraping against the wood beneath. 2 other little old men were dragging him away. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A 3rd little old man came out of nowhere and picked up an eyeball of the one who had fallen victim. I freaked out and ran up the stairs to tell my sister, but when she came down, all the evidence was gone. I told you not to go near those things. Where's the trap? I don't think she believed me, and I was angrily escorted back to bed. But again in the night I awoke unpleasantly, with a pain in my left calf and another in my right hip. It was hard to see in the dark, but I immediately realized what was happening. It was those same little old men, their beards pressed against my skin and their open maws suckling away at my blood. I could even feel the detail of their tongues moving through the wounds, hooked like a cat's tongue. I screamed and tried to kick them off. They were dense little fellows, a lot heavier than they looked, although they were only about the size of a grown man's hand from head to foot. They were persistent too. They didn't want to let go of their meal until forced to do so. I heard my dad stomping around in my parents' room and yelling something. His door burst open down the hall and he came charging towards my room. There was a loud crack as a rat trap went off in the hallway, followed by a heavy thud, and now my dad was screaming. At last the little gnomes released their grip on me and scampered away into the vent. I hurried to get my pajama pants back on and then rushed out into the hallway, where all my other family members were converging on my dad. He had managed to get the trap off of his foot, but some of the bones were clearly broken, and it was beginning to swell up like a balloon. He was actually lucky, though, that he stepped right onto it. If it had caught out an odd toe, he would have definitely lost it. My mom rushed my dad to the hospital, and my sister was glaring at me. Did she think I had done this as some kind of messed up prank? I started to pace as I did when I got nervous, and heading back into my room I noticed a rat trap beside my bed that I had inadvertently stepped over. My heart skipped a beat as I searched for the meaning. These gnomes, not only were they clearly organized and intelligent, they were trying to seek out revenge. Dawn broke only a couple of hours later, and our parents were still at the hospital. I looked into the cupboard under the kitchen sink to see a pile of rat traps and rat poison, all clearly identified and disarmed. These ones not set up for revenge, but rather leaving a message. It was Saturday. My sister was oddly quiet, like she didn't want to associate with me. She might have had plans too, but she just left the house mid-morning without saying a word, locking the door behind her. I snuck out the back and went over to my friend Fred's house. His parents hadn't wanted me to come over because they were embarrassed about their rat situation, but I had a bit of a messed up idea I wanted to try. My dad had this opossum trap that he kept in the shed. It was a cage with a pressure plate designed to humanely trap animals. I brought it with me into Fred's backyard and knocked on the door. He let me in. He was perfectly happy to see me, of course, and as long as his parents didn't know, we were good to go. The worst of the nests were in his basement. He wasn't allowed to go down there, but I convinced him to let me. I carefully stepped over a bunch of traps and poison and set my bait down inside my pressure plate cage. We played video games for 3 hours, and after that I went back downstairs to find out that I had caught 4 emaciated rats. Fred's parents had been doing a good job of cutting off their food sources. The rats were even trying to bite at my fingers as I carried the cage back to my house. I carefully aligned the door of the cage with the opening between the dishwasher and the cupboard, and released the beasts. Little squeals and screams and high-pitched grunts erupted shortly thereafter. There was an absolutely blood-soaked chaos unfolding just beyond my vision. Behind the dishwasher, in the cupboards, even over behind the fridge, I started to hear more cries of pain and fear. I opened the cupboard under the sink tentatively, my curiosity getting the better of me. A gnome was chased into my view, pursued hotly by 2 starving rats. He was unarmed and looked utterly unprepared for what was to happen next. One of them got him by the earlobe and dragged him to the ground. He fought through his suffering, allowing it to be ripped right off as he came charging out towards the light, but the next rat caught him by the throat. His screams were horrific, and he looked at me in the eyes. His eyes had those horizontal bars like a sheep's, but other than that, they had a lot of humanity behind them. In his last moments he hissed and bit down on the rat's throat in turn with his sharp little teeth, but the violence and the will to live of the rodents was stronger. It wasn't too long before his innards were on display, and I shut the cupboard, disturbed. I felt incredibly guilty. What had I done to these little humanoid creatures? These intelligent creatures? I was grounded for 6 months when my parents got home, partly for letting rats into the house, partly because after finding the bodies of the gnomes, they thought they were fake. My parents' brains couldn't allow them to believe that what they were seeing was real. They thought they were some messed up dolls that I had created, and that I was a twisted kid. They put me in therapy as well, and to be honest, I needed it, but not for the reasons that they thought. I've never really got over watching a grown man being eaten by what to him are life-size rats. I still have nightmares about it 12 years later. Over the next couple days, I kept finding razor blades in my shoes and socks as well. I don't know if those had been placed the night before, or if the gnomes managed to hang on another few days, but whatever it was, they were gone shortly after that. Hey guys, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that story. I know it's a slightly different subgenre of horror, more disturbing rather than those long drawn-out creepy sequences, but I hope you enjoyed it nevertheless. Subscribe and hit the bell for next week's story, which is going to be The Grave Hag, which is basically an extra gross type of witch. And also tune in on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Nightmare Theater, an open book club for nightmares. Until next time, embrace the beautiful dark.